come to the part of our service this evening, the inspirational talk. And our speaker this evening is now in front of the curtain, Mark Thomas. And he's well known and loved by all of us here. I'm going to, though, share from his bio for those who may be joining us who haven't been introduced formally. So let me, and you can think of, if those of you who do know him, you see if you remember all of these things about Mark, right? So he was born and raised in Rockford, Illinois. His early spiritual development came from his family, actively engaged in the United Methodist Church. After graduating from the University of Illinois, Mark moved to New York State, and he took a job managing the Outdoor Education Center for SUNY Brockport. After 7 years in that position, Mark and Elaine were married, and he started his training and consulting work in the human resources field. Elaine Thomas, our other founding pastor here, the late Elaine, she and Mark began applying, or I should say Mark and she began applying the accelerated learning to the teaching of spiritual development practices through their modeling course known as Spiritual Insight Training. In 1988, along with Dr. and Mrs. Panabianco, Elaine and Mark founded Fellowships of the Spirit and its School of Healing and Prophecy. Mark's interest in public service brought him to be elected to the Pomfret Town Board in 1991, and he served as Chautauqua County's executive for 2 terms. In 2007, Mark returned to his original career as the director of Western District of New York State Parks, retiring from public service in May of 2018. Over the years, Mark's passionate desire for spiritual development has brought him to study Vedic, Taoist, Buddhist, and mystical Christian teachings with a variety of teachers and writers from around the world. He currently lectures at various spiritual communities and continues to teach classes in advanced meditation practices in the School of Healing and Prophecy and to its graduates. So, thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Joanne. Yes, the growing edge. We've moved from planting seeds to growing edges. Not hedges, edges. So, yes, and one of the things that I've done again this year is get back into gardening, and it's really fun after the seeds are planted to just go out and keep checking every day to see how much is coming up, the growing edge, how much is poking above the ground, and knowing that there's a lot of good food coming and in its own time and way. The theme Growing Edge, when we were developing the themes for the Vespers this year, was from one of my favorite teachers from the last century, Howard Thurman. He wrote a book back in 1956, which was a collection of his sermons, and they're as relevant today as they were back then. It's just amazing how his writings and talks were timeless. I'll read you the prayer, if you will. It's palm prayer. It's both called the Growing Edge, or look well to the growing edge, I should say. All around us, worlds are dying and new worlds are being born. All around us, life is dying and life is being born. The fruit ripens on the tree. The roots are silently at work in the darkness of the earth. Against the time when there shall be new leaves, fresh blossoms, green fruit. Such is the growing edge. It is the extra breath from the exhausted lung, the one more thing to try when all else has failed. the upward reach of life when weariness closes in upon all endeavor. This is the basis of hope in moments of despair, the incentive to carry on when times are out of joint and people have lost their reason, the source of confidence when worlds clash and dreams whiten into ash, the birth of a child, life's most dramatic answer to death. This is the growing edge incarnate. Look well to the growing edge. Howard Thurman. You know, as I age and hopefully sage, that's not guaranteed. Some days better than others. I keep really resonating with the fact that I think the Buddha had it right. This whole concept of impermanence that he taught. And so clearly it made it all so simple, even though it's very difficult to comprehend and to live. You know, his message being life is impermanent. And I always had the corollary that he probably didn't say, but I would say, deal with it. And we have a real challenge with that second part, that deal with it at times. It's the edges of growth where big shifts occur in our lives. It's those moments where things are shifting, where we have the greatest capacity to affect direction in life, our own and others. When things are most fluid and we can move easily to adjust to conditions of change, it's these moments when we can cling to the status quo, or we can embrace the shifts that are being wrought. The former is fraught with suffering, the latter is possibilities. Beginning to be known and an opportunity for us to engage our imagination and our creativity is in the latter. There's a scene while I was preparing for this talk from one of the Indiana Jones movies, the Last Crusade movie, when he and his father were out looking for the Holy Grail and trying to get it before the dark forces got a hold of it and did bad things. And so there's this scene near the end of the movie where they're getting so close to finding the Holy Grail. And he runs through this cave, and all of a sudden he comes up to this huge chasm that the edges just drop right off. And the message that he has to remember, there's these clues that they have to follow to get to the Holy Grail. And at that moment, the passage that is the passage is the leap. Take the leap of faith. Interesting, you chose that inspirational message tonight. And so he's looking out over this chasm, and there's no bridge. There's nothing there. So he has to take a step into the abyss and have faith that that bridge is going to appear. Well, guess what he does? He steps out, boom, instead of falling to his death, the bridge appears under his feet, and he walks across, and the story goes on. He has to take the leap of faith. You know, it's in those moments where we grow, when we step into those opportunities for growth, instead of hold back to what we know so well. And it's not always easy. One of the things in Christendom, last week was the week following Pentecost, is called Trinity Sunday, where they celebrate the Trinity. And that was nothing that Jesus taught, but the church developed it and has promoted it for a couple thousand years now. So, but they were in their worship, they really do celebrate the Trinity on that Sunday. And it reminded me, as I was again preparing, about another Trinity that I can really cotton well to. And it comes from the Vedic teachings. And they're called the three gunas. And it's not Larry, Curly, and Moe. It has to do with three forces in that affect all of created matter. Everything that's observable, everything that's a phenomenon of any level are subject to these forces. And the first force is the force of creative energy. The second is the energy that sustains. And the third guna, the third force, is the destruction renovation phase of energy. And that everything that we know, and this ties directly into the impermanence that the Buddha spoke of as well, is in the process of either dynamically more in the creative phase, more in the sustaining phase, or more in the destruction renovation phase. And depending on which is the most predominant force at the time, things are either in their formative stage, they're cruising, or they're coming apart at the seams and need to do that as well. So when we try to hold on to the sustaining energy past the point where a thing needs to be sustained, we experience something called pain. We suffer. And that's one of the other things the Buddha taught too. It's our things that we hold on to too long where we suffer, where we don't let go of those things. And letting go is scary stuff sometimes. Letting go can engender fear because we don't know, like with the leap of faith, if I take that step, is there going to be anything under my feet or not? The third thing that happens in that time, in that space of letting go, is grief. And grief is an essential part of creating room in our lives for newness to occur. If we don't grieve, we're full, our cup is full of the tears, it's full of the sadness, it's full of the sorrow. And there's no room for newness to come in until we release that grief from our hearts and our minds. The prophet Jeremiah, when he was doing his work with Israel, think about this. Sometimes we think things are bad here, but back when he was doing his prophecy work, things were really bad. I mean, the entire Israel nation, the Hebrew nation, was destroyed. It was blown up and taken away as slaves to Mesopotamia, now Syria. And his job was to tell them, yeah, but it is really bad, and what we need to do is come back to our roots, come back to our basis for how we have come through hard times before, because it's in our accepting our condition and grieving what we have lost that we create the room to reestablish ourselves in the hope and the possibilities of a different future. And then there's this other matter, the work of Howard Thurman I read talks about the birth of a child as the ultimate growing edge incarnate, right? But also death is that too. And what's one of the hardest things for us to accept is that death is part of a growing edge in life. And it can be the little deaths along the way, or it can be the big death where we're out of here. And all of that is about claiming newness in life. It's about claiming birth in a new life. If it's a death from here, it's, as we as spiritualists know, it's about stepping into the next dimensions of our lives. We're leaving behind, and one of the great things that folks have to do in the process of dying is to let go of all those things that they're holding so tightly to and trying to keep permanent that are simply impermanent. So to contemplate the fact that death is in fact part of the growing edge is an important part of our coming to terms with our lives as human beings. And that it is truly one of the two great ultimate growing edges we face: birth and death. So this week, I want to ask you to ponder some questions. You were afraid I'd do that, weren't you? What are you stagnating in your life? What's in a state of stagnation? We know what happens with ponds when they get stagnant, right? The water gets kind of ugly, kind of nasty. And what is it that we need, that we're holding on to too tightly, that it's time for it to let go? And what is the shift you need to make to end the stagnation? And the third question is, so what would you like to make room for in your life as a result of what you've done about letting go of something that needs to be let go of? So that it's no longer about stepping into an abyss, but it's about stepping into a future, into possibilities and opportunities and imagination. What I've come to know is that hope wins, life wins, and love wins in the end. And when we hit those moments where the growth is right in our face, clinging to those possibilities. And I think Dr. Thurman's correct in imploring us to look well to the growing edge. I have a couple of passages from a woman whose poetry and writings I have come to really enjoy lately, named Susan Freibort, and she has a series of books out now. And I want to read you some of those brief passages because they will put a cap on my talk this evening. Life is not passing you by. Life is inviting you in. Inviting you into the simple and sudden moments of quiet yet invigorating bliss that veer on the wind and into your stilled body, sending tingles through your spirit. Life is not passing you by. Life is drawing you close, pulling you in and calling you towards an awakening spark that will ignite the purest imaginative thought and vision into being. Life is not overlooking you, underestimating you, or merely passing through. Life is subtly requesting you take all you've held safely within and give it room to be birthed into creative expression. No, life has not heartlessly given up on you. Life is graciously standing by. And then the other passage from her I'd like to share with you to conclude. For one day soon you will step into your own stunning universe beyond the myths, outside any limitations or predictions, far from the illusions this life invents, as you answer the call to uncover the many starlit truths contained inside your incomparable soul. You will be reborn to fresh and glorious revelations only you can carry to completion. And while all the infinite possibilities expand within, you may sing aloud, rejoicing in your new birth, no longer owned by anyone's idea of who you should be. Who you should be. So I leave you with those passages from Open Passages by Susan Freibort this evening, and invite you to take the challenge this week of what is it time to make new in your lives, because these are the moments, the growing edge is when you have the greatest capacity to bring about newness and opportunities for change and growth that affect your life, but compassionately can be there in the lives of others as well. Thank you.